Yeah. Um, what, in your opinion, is the biggest need in leadership development today?
Biggest need? I think that I, maybe a step back, in all honesty. I think that sometimes in our effort to produce something, we become tunnel visioned on that one thing and we forget that there's a lot that comes prior to that. And if we begin to assume all of those things that come before and we assume those, we kind of set those aside even unintentionally and we focus on this one aspect of the Christian life, then we can make a very large mistake. And I think that when it comes to Christian leadership, whether we're talking about developing or honing leadership abilities among the adult population of the church, or if we're focusing on young leaders and developing those abilities for future opportunities or even current opportunities for them, we focus on that leadership, and I think that the greatest need is for us to maybe step back from that and realize, sort of like what we were talking about just a moment ago, that character is huge when it comes to leadership. If you are going to be a leader, people have to trust you. But if you don't have the character that is trustworthy, you can call yourself a leader all day long, but you're really not a leader at that point. The other thing, too, I think, is we step back and deal with some of the more fundamental issues of leadership. Because even when you step back and you focus on those characteristics and the character of the person and what biblical ethics is all about, what the nature of Christ is all about, not necessarily the nature of the divine nature of Christ, but just the nature of who he was. When you step back and you do those things, you really are still helping to develop leadership. It's not like you're ignoring leadership. You're not setting it on the back burner. All of those things feed right into leadership. But when we think about those things, we also have to realize that there will always be far more followers than there are leaders. And my fear is that in the environment in which we live today, that really does celebrate leadership development. You go into the average Christian bookstore, and there are all kinds of books on developing the leader within you, or becoming the leader that you've always dreamt of being, or whatever. We talk a lot about mentoring and everything else. That's very, very popular today, and I think for a good reason. But as we do so, I think we ignore the reality that there will be a very large population of people within the church who are followers, and there's nothing wrong with that. So when are we developing followership? And I think that there's an aspect there that if we do not produce good followers, then we will not produce good leaders. Because a leader does know how to follow. But if we do not focus on how to follow and how to be that servant, I mean, Jesus made it very clear that if you're going to be a leader, if you're going to be great among, if you're going to be the first, you've got to be last. Jesus provides this wonderful example for us. Tremendous leader, right? And yet he was a servant. And that's more than just a model of leadership. It's not something that we just simply that makes a great next book title, servant leadership. Jesus was a servant to us in meeting our greatest need. And as we see him leading us in that capacity as servant, we truly see how we ought to then live our lives as well. When you look at the way the Bible talks about Christians in general, there are far more terms regarding our followership than our leadership. Servant, bondslave, slave. Those three terms are interchangeable. Sheep. We're in desperate need of a shepherd, right? Good one, Cole. We have a master, right? Even the terms that we run across that we don't always recognize maybe as servant terminology in days of Christ, days of Paul, were definitely seen as servant terminology. A messenger. A messenger was somebody that was simply taking a message from one person to another person or a group of persons, and they were serving the need of that process to get the word to that group of people. An ambassador. Today when we think of an ambassador, we think of that person who drives up with flags waving on the front of their car, and they've got an entourage and everything else, power, influence, or whatever. But in the grand scheme of things, even today, they're just simply a messenger boy, But especially in the day of Paul, if you were an ambassador, if you were somebody who took a message from one reigning individual to another nation, many times that meant that you were going to lose your head, especially if you were in conflict with one another. So even ambassadors, when we talk about ourselves as being an ambassador of Christ, we are talking about ourselves in servant terminology. So I think the greatest need for leadership, to get back on track here, is to step back and to help our people, especially our younger people, our students, high school students, college students, young adults, and quite frankly, even some older adults. We need to teach how to be humble followers of Christ, and therefore humble followers of the leadership that Christ has established within the context of their ministry involvement, whether that's the pastor or elders or a Sunday school teacher or a ministry director or whatever. They need to learn and need to understand that as a Christian, we follow, and we follow eagerly, according to the teaching of Scripture, and as long as that person is truly glorifying and being obedient to Christ, then we really know how to lead, I think.
To realize the highest among us is still under someone.
Yeah, exactly.
Good.
Yeah.